Hi everyone! Another lesson for Intermediate Accounting 2, okay, which is debt restructuring. So, ano ba tungkol ba saan itong debt restructuring? So, we identify the nature and purpose of debt restructuring, types of debt restructuring, and then account for debt restructuring in asset swap, equity swap, and modification of terms of the old liability. So, ano ba itong debt restructuring na to? When you say debt restructuring, ito yung gipit ka na, okay? Nagdadasal ka na sa lahat ng pwedeng pagdasalan na sana nagkaroon ng mabuting puso itong creditor ko. Okay? Biglang nasagot yung dasal mo at yung creditor siya, sige, if hindi ka makakabayad ngayon, extend ko yung deadline. Tapos isip-isip mo, kahit i-extend yung deadline, wala kang pambayad ng liability. So, pakiusap uli. So, ngayon, ang nangyari is, it's either pumayag siya na ang kapalit ng payment mo sa halip na, let's say, cash. Yung napag-usapan nyo dati is, pumayag siya na asset, non-cash asset na lang. Okay, like property, plant equipment, land, building, or ano man. O di kaya naman, pumayag siya na bigyan mo na lang siya ng shares of stock ng corporation mo. So, magiging may-ari siya ng iyong corporation. Okay? One of the owners as a shareholder. Okay? O di kaya naman, pumayag siya na, sige, wag mo nang bayaran yung accrued interest na hindi mo talaga mabayaran throughout the years. Sige, sa halip na 5 million yung bayaran mo, 4 million na lang. And also, dahil hindi mo kaya yung taas ng interest rate na pinag-agreehan natin 5 years ago, sige, liitan ko na lang. Okay? So, nagdilang anghel. Okay? So, that's what debt restructuring is all about. Okay? So, this is actually, it can be made through agreement or by a law or court. So, we have a special law dealing with rehabilitation of a corporation or an entity na undergoing or nasa state na siya ng insolvency, going bankruptcy. Okay? And also, there is a law pertaining to liquidation. Okay? So, if subject ka na, if you are falling under those laws, okay? Let's say, for example, nag-declare ka na ng bankruptcy or insolvency, or di kaya naman yung creditors mo nag-declare ng insolvency, you are now subject to the provisions of the laws, okay? And one of those is, pwede kang, you can enter with your creditor in a debt restructuring, okay? If feasible, okay? And then, para saan ba itong debt restructuring? Bakit siya pinapayagan? This is making the best out of a bad situation. Okay? Sa halip na wala kang matanggap, may matatanggap pa rin ikaw as a creditor, pero konti na lang. Kumbaga, hindi eksaktong amount, pero at least may natanggap ka. Okay? O di kaya naman, naging stockholder ka nung corporation niya, although lugi ka na kaunti, pero alam mong maganda, may future, or may future, may potential itong company to grow in the future. Okay, maging trend siya. So, at least ngayon, kahit lugi ka ngayon, in the future, mababawi mo siya. O di kaya naman is, parang nabigyan mo siya ng pagkakataon to pay you as much as possible by modifying the terms. Okay, so, this maximize recovery of an investment. So, sabi nga, at least meron. Ano? Okay? So, we have 3 types of debt restructuring procedures. We have asset swap, equity swap, and modification of terms. Asset swap, sinaswap, it's actually it's the non-cash asset. Transfer by the debtor to the creditor of any assets such as real estate, inventory, receivables, investment in full payment of an obligation. According to PFRS 9, this is actually a derecognition or extinguishment of a financial liability. Okay, so ibig sabihin, if tinanggap ng creditor itong iyong property or non-cash asset na bilang kapalit or bilang pambayad utang ng debtor, considered extinguished na yung financial liability. Hindi ka na pwedeng habulin na, uy, teka, hindi naman itong pinagkasunduan natin nung una nasa kontrata natin, cash. Pero, parang, sige, tinanggap ko siya, pero hindi pwedeng ganun. Okay, hindi pwedeng bigla na lang nagbago yung isip mo na singilin mo din yung cash, hindi. according to PFRS 9, it's actually the recognition of a financial liability once the transaction is completed. Okay? So, given here is an example. So, an entity has the following balances. You have notes payable, principal amount is 2 million with accrued interest payable of 400,000. At year end, the entity transferred to the creditor land with a carrying amount of 1.5 and a fair value of 2.2. Okay, so we have formula. This is actually how to account for asset swap. You determine the total liability, which is the principal, okay, plus any interest that is accrued. Okay, magpasalamat sa problem if binanggit yung accrued interest. Okay, if it was issued, the financial liability is issued between interest dates, you have to compute for accrued interest if not given. Okay, although na-discuss natin siya sa bonds payable. Okay, and then less carrying amount of the asset given. So, even if given ka ng fair values ni asset, okay, as PFRS 9 tells us, the carrying amount of the asset given is considered. Okay, hindi yung fair value, the carrying amount. So, what is the carrying amount? That is actually the cost of the asset less any accumulated depreciation. Okay, if there's impairment loss, less any impairment loss. Okay, so is equal to gain or loss and extinguishment of debt. So given the problem, we have the total liability, which is the 2 million principal value plus 400,000 accrued interest payable, is equal to 2.4, and then less the carrying amount of the land, kasi land yung binigay niya, which is 1.5. You have gain on extinguishment of 900,000. Now, bakit siya gain? Okay? Kasi, kaya siya naging gain, yung utang mo is 2.4 million, pero na-extinguish siya nung nagbigay ka ng land with a carrying amount of 1.5 M. Okay? So, gain mo yun on your part, na sa halip na 2.4 million worth of property ang ibigay mo, yung tutugma dun sa yung liability, pumayag na siya sa carrying amount of the land at 1.5. So, you have gain on extinguishment. Other way around, pag mas mataas yung value ng asset na binigay mo sa kanya kaysa sa financial liability na babayaran mo lang, meron kang loss. Okay? So, we journalize the transaction as first we extinguish the financial liability or they recognize it. You debit the note payable and then you debit accrued interest payable kasi sa books niya naka-credit siya. So, how do you recognize? You debit it. 2,400,000 magka-cancel out na sila, magzi-zero na. Okay? Then, credit land kasi nagbigay ka ng land. So, mawawala na yun sa books mo at 1.5 and then gain on extinguishment of debt. It is an income kaya siya naka-credit. Okay? So, gain on extinguishment of debt of 900,000. Okay? Now, we have what you call the Sian Pago. I know you have encountered this in your law subject. Okay? This is where a mortgage property is offered as a full settlement of the debt. Okay? So, mortgage property. So, usually mga financial institutions na wherein bago ka umutang, kailangan mag-present ka ng property other than cash. Okay? Hindi, property na pwede nilang gawing collateral. Okay? Mo-mortgage niya yun. Okay? So, this will be accounted for as an asset swap. So, the Sian Pago is an asset swap. Okay? So, example, land costing 500,000 and building costing 4 million with accumulated depreciation of 800,000 were mortgaged to secure a bank loan of 3 million. It has given the following accounts. Yung loan daw is 3 million. Yung accrued interest payable niya is 200,000 with bank service charges of 50,000. Subsequently, the land and the building were given to the bank in full payment of the liability. Okay, let's use the formula. Total liability less carrying amount of the asset given. Total liability is the principal amount of 3 million, 200,000 interest payable, and bank service charges na 50,000. Okay, total of 3.250. Okay, so yung bank service charge, it's actually directly attributable para makuha mo yung loan. Okay, so kaya kasama siya sa total liability. Okay, now, the carrying amount of the land and building. So, given ka ng 500,000 for the land. For the building, that's 4 million with accumulated depreciation of 800,000. So, 4 million less 800,000. So, that's 3.2 million. Okay, that's your carrying amount. And you just add the two, 3.7 million. Now, 3.250 less 3.7 you'll get 450,000 loss. Why? Ang give up mo kasing property or the asset is worth 3.7. Pero ang babayaran mo lang naman is 3.250. Okay? So, yan. That's a loss. How do you journalize? So, you recognize the payable, the financial liability, which is the mortgage payable, the accrued interest, and then the bank service charge. Okay? So, debit, mortgage payable, accrued interest, bank service charge, and then magde-debit ka ng loss because it's a loss, it's an expense. Loss and extinguishment of debt is 450,000. Kaya siya naka-debit. And then, syempre, ika-cancel out mo yung accumulated depreciation that is accompanied to sa building. Okay, so asin mo siya, how do you tanggal it? You debit it, okay? Kasi naka-credit siya sa book, so debit mo siya. Debit accumulated depreciation of 800,000. Then, credit yung dalawang pinamigay mo na asset, that's land, 500,000, and building, 4 million. Okay? So, yun. That's how you do asset swap. Okay? It's clear? It's clear? Okay? Sorry. Before we proceed to equity swap, you will see another version of the asset swap accounting under US GAAP. Okay? Sa US GAAP, we have dalawa yung naging transaction niya, which is the recognition of the asset na binigay, and then it's the extinguishment of the debt. Okay, so pinagtatama yung fair value of the asset and then the carrying amount of the asset to get the gain or loss. And then also, ginagawa yung ginagawa natin ngayon. So, again, it is used by US GAAP. Okay? So, here in the Philippines, we're using PFRS 9. So, kaya PFRS 9 is mandated to be studied. Okay? Kasi gamit siya. Okay, sa Philippines. And some other countries in the world. Okay? Most of the countries in the world use IFRS, which is the basis for PFRS. Okay? So, yun. If you encounter such problem, okay, so be familiar with US GAAP way of asset swap. Ano? Okay? Next, we have another type, the equity swap. Here, ang ibibigay mo is hindi asset. Ang ibibigay mo kapalit ng extinguishment ng debt is equity securities or shares of stock. Ano? Equity securities. Okay, now, this is governed by IFRIC 19. Okay, why? Because throughout the years, walang specific interpretation, wala ding specific standard to answer the question, how do you account for an equity swap? Okay? Now, ngayon, nabigyan na siya ng concrete interpretation, okay, which is IFRIC 19. What does the interpretation tells us? Sabi, the equity issued to extinguish all or part of the financial liability are recognized initially at fair value of the equity instruments issued. Okay? If such fair value can reliably measured. Paano pag hindi? Pag hindi, you use the order of priority. So, pag wala si fair value of equity instruments issued, which is the top priority, ang sunod mong hanapin is the fair value of the liability extinguished. If wala si fair value of the equity, at wala din si fair value of liability, or they cannot be reliably measured, kunin mo na lang si carrying amount of the liability extinguished. Okay? So, that's the order of priority as guided by IFRIC 19. Okay? To be used in equity swap. Now, how do we account for such? We have carrying amount of the financial liability, which is the same with the asset sources, total liability, less kung anong applicable order of priority ang pwedeng gamitin. Okay, if nandyan si fair value of the equity instrument, yes, siya ang priority, siya ang gagamitin mo. Kahit bigay pa, yan tatlong yan, siya lang yung gagamitin mo. Paano kapag wala si number 1, di si number 2? Paano pag wala si number 1 at 2, si number 3? Saka mo lang gagamitin si number 3 pag wala si 1 at 2. Okay? So, you'll get the gain or loss on extinguishment of debt. Sample. The entity has the following accounts at year-end: bonds payable, 5 million with accrued interest payable of 500,000. The entity issued share capital with a total par value of 2 million and fair value of 4.5 million with in full settlement of the bonds payable and accrued interest. On the other hand, the fair value of the bonds payable is 4.7. As you can see, given the new fair value of the liability extinguished. Okay, and the fair value of the equity instrument. So, pwede na natin siyang computein kasi given naman yung top priority. So, the carrying amount of the bonds, that's 5 million plus the accrued 500,000. You'll get 5.5 million less fair value of the shares issued. So, hanapin mo lang fair value, you have 4.5 million. And then, gain on extinguishment of debt, pag pinag-minus mo si 5.5 at si 4.5, you'll get 1 million. Now, question, bakit siya gain on extinguishment of debt? Kasi yung value na binigay mong equity security sa kanya is 4.5 for a 5.5 loan. Ano? Bakit siya tinanggap, ma'am, ng creditor as payment? Kasi anong nangyari? Naging shareholder siya ng company mo. Is either merong siyang significant influence. Okay, remember your investments. Okay, meron siyang significant influence by having the 4.5 million. So, may ability siya to significantly affect the activities of your company. Okay, so, yon. O di kaya naman, nakakita siya ng future mo or potential mo na magbo-boom ka in the future. So may mga ganong corporations na ngayon hindi siya patok, pero in the near future, siya yung trend. Okay, for example, ngayon, dati naman, hindi uso, hindi pa na kumukuha mga schools ng LMS. Okay, yung pang blended learning. Okay, pero ngayon, as the technology age ay progresses, okay, nagkaroon ng need for an LMS, lalo na ngayong pandemic. Okay, so, alin yung naging in na companies, those companies that formulates or develops a platform for LMS, okay, or develops an LMS for schools to purchase, tapos ipa-personalize na lang nila for school. Okay, so mas marami silang sales ngayon. Ano pa din ang companies na in ngayong pandemic? Zoom, okay, yung mga cloud source na gives you the ability to do conferences. Okay, kasi nga pandemic. So, sila yung in. Dati hindi tumataas yung share value niya, yung stock value nila. Kasi hindi pa siya in trend. Wala pang mga factors to tell you that the value of the company is significant. Okay, pero ngayon talagang in demand na sila, kaya yung stock value niya is sa pataas. Okay, so baka ganun yung nangyari dito, kaya tinanggap na lang ni creditor yung 4.5 million worth ng fair value of these shares. Okay, next, so you will be asked the share premium. Okay, how do you compute? So you have the fair value of the shares issued less the par value of the shares, you'll get share premium. Okay, ang tawag ko sa share premium nung undergrad ako is yung AWAS. Why ba? Kasi parang sa isip ko, ang talagang cost ng shares is the par value, and then nakuha siya because of the such factors in the market. Yung fair value niya mas mataas. Okay, kaya umawas siya. Yung awas, ang tawag doon is share premium. Okay, so you have 4.5 million na shares. Okay, fair value of the shares, and then par value is 2 million. You have a share premium of 2.5. Okay, how do we record the transaction? So we derecognize the liability. So we have debit bonds payable, credit debit accrued interest payable, so that's 5.5, and then we credit share capital because we issued shares. Share capital is valued at par value, always at par value. Okay, so share capital is at 2 million. Share premium, yung na-compute natin is 2.5, and then don't forget the gain on extinguishment of debt. Okay, so yun. So the gain on extinguishment is 1 million as computed kanina. Okay? Parang I'm super stressed, charot lang. Anyway, so last type is the modification of terms. So ano nangyayari? Mino-modify yung interest or the maturity value or both. Okay, kung gaano kabait ang iyong creditor. Okay, anyway. So there are two types of modification, the substantial and then the not substantial. Okay, anong pinagkaiba nila? Yung substantial modification kasi, when the gain or loss on extinguishment must computed, it is 10% or more than the carrying amount of the old liability. So, ibig sabihin, substantial yung modification niya, malaki yung pinagkaiba niya. Okay, so pag nangyari daw yon according to PFRS 9, it is considered an extinguishment of debt and a recognition of a new liability. So, sa journal entry, magre-reflect yung the recognition of the old liability and the recognition of the new liability. Okay. On the other hand, sa no substantial modification, that is 9% less than, okay, or less, okay, ng yung gain or loss, so na-compute mo siya, binangga mo siya sa carrying amount, dinivide mo siya sa carrying amount of the old liability, lumabas na it's 9% and below, okay, yung percentage niya, there's no substantial modification. So, pag there's no substantial modification, the same, yung gain or loss is nire-report pa rin sa P&L. However, there is no the recognition of the old financial liability and recognition of the new financial liability, wala. Okay, so, yun lang na-forgive yung accrued interest interest payable, re-reflect mo lang, o di kaya naman nagbago yung interest expense na binabayaran mo because nagbago yung interest rate, yung mga ganun lang yung nire-recognize if there is no substantial modification. Okay? So, let's see. Ay, wala pa pala. So, we have how do you compute for the gain or loss on extinguishment? So, we have carrying amount of the old liability as seen sa equity and the asset swap, and then the present value of the new or restructured liability. So, we will be computing present values when it comes to modification of terms. So, note lang, when you compute for the present value, you use the old rate. Okay? In computing for the PV factors, old rate. However, when computing for the interest, okay, the new interest, you use the new rate. Okay, so yung principal, yung new din. Okay, if ever nagbago yung principal and then yung interest percentage. Okay, so yan. Any cost incurred as a result of the substantial modification is recognized as part of gain or loss on extinguishment. Okay? So let's see, here's an example. We have on January 1, 2020, an entity showed the following. Note payable due on January 1, due na pala Okay? 14% yung interest niya, 5 million. Accrued interest payable of 1 million. Laki ng accrued. The entity is granted by the creditor the following concessions on January 1. The accrued interest of 1 million is forgiven. Wow! Mabait. Huwag mo na daw bayaran yung 1 million. The principal obligation is reduced to 4 million. Wow! From 5 million, naging 4 million. Then, the new interest rate is 10%. Wow! From 14, naging 10 na lang. Payable every December 31. And then, bago na din yung maturity date niya. Sa halip na 2020, sisingilin niya, gawin ko 2023. Wow! Ang bait ng creditor mo. Okay? It's likely to happen. Ngayon, because we're going to compute her present values, I have given the present value factors na. Her PV of 1, of 14%. 14. So, I'm using the old rate, okay? For 4 periods. Bakit siya naging 4? Kasi from 2020 to 2023. Okay? So, that's 0.5921, and then the PV of OA of 1 at 14% for 4 periods is 2.9137. Okay? So, note ulit. Lagi ko ninonote. So, let's compute. Present value of the principal, you use the new financial liability. Ang principal niya is 4 million. Yung bago. Times yung PV of 1. Okay? Kasi one-time payment lang yung principal. 0.5921. That's 2,368,400. Now, for the present value of interest payments, as you can see, ang gamit is yung new rate to compute the interest. So, that's 4 million times 10%, you'll get 400,000. Times 2.9137, that's 1,165,480. Okay? Then, add mo lang yung dalawa, you'll get the present value of the new note payable of 3.533880. Okay? Now, we can compute for the gain or loss on extinguishment. You have carrying amount of the old liability of 6 million. Okay? Less present value of the new note of 3,533,880. Okay, and then gain on extinguishment of debt of 2,466,120. So, you have gain. Okay, bakit? Kasi yung new note is actually just valued at 3,533,880. Pero yung na-extinguish siya yung debt before is 6 million. Okay? Now we record, okay? Because there's substantial modification, kasi, yan, nawala. 2,466,120 divided by 6,000,000 is more than 10%. Kasi ang 10% ng 6,000,000 is at 600,000 if I'm not mistaken. So, lampas na siya ng 10%. So, there is substantial modification. Because there's substantial modification, you have to derecognize the old liability. Okay, so, debit, note payable, owed, 5,000,000, and then debit the accrued interest payable of 1,000,000. Okay? Now, we credit, we recognize the new note payable. Okay, that's credit note payable new 4,000,000. Okay, and then we have gain on extinguishment of debt of 2,466,120. Okay, so yung discount on note payable is also computed. Okay, kasi tawag din it was discounted sa halip na 4,000,000 na natanggap mo, ang natanggap mo is at 3,533,880. Okay? So, you'll get 4,661,20. Okay? So, yan. Then, we recognize also interest payment. Okay? So, that's interest expense, 4,000,000 times 10%, 400,000, and then credit cash of 400,000. If cash ang pinambayad mo, if hindi naman cash, you use interest payable. Okay? Next, we record the amortization. Nandiyan na naman si amortization table. Okay? We have 245, the 5 columns. We have the date, the interest paid. So, the interest paid is 400,000 as computed kanina. That's 4,000,000 times 10%. The interest expense, you have the discount amortization and then the carrying amount. So, because the amortization re-record natin, we debit interest expense. That's 94,743. As you can see here. Yan. Here. And then, credit discount on note payable, 94,743. Okay? To lessen the discount on note payable account na dinebit mo kanina. So, yun. So, going 4,000,000 tayo kasi naka-discount tayo. Para sa 2022, yung babayaran mong principal is 4,000,000. Okay? Yun lang. So, if this was done, okay, ang lumabas is no substantial modification. Okay? So, hindi siya nag-10%. Ang mangyayari, wala itong debit note payable at saka, debit note payable at wala din yung credit note payable nyo. Ang meron is yung debit accrued interest payable. Bakit? Kasi na-forgive. So, hindi mo na kailangan bayadan daw yung accrued interest payable. So, tatanggalin mo na siya as payable mo. Okay? And then, yun. If there is no substantial modification. Okay? Pero if meron, ay di nakalagay. Okay? Anyway, so, see you on the guided exercise for more examples. Okay? So, we have remaining topics as lease for lessees, and then lease for lessors, and then income tax payable, and then post-employment benefits, and then shareholders' equity. Okay? Kayang-kaya natin yan. Anyway, so, ingat kayo guys. See you when I see you, and bye!